My name is Alara Wynn, 35 years old. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, thick as guilt and heavy with money. It had that faint winery smell, oak, something floral, like the paper itself wanted to be poured into a glass and swirled beneath a chandelier. I knew the crest before I turned it over, the Larson seal. We never used our name on anything small. Inside, filigreed script announced the thing I'd spent 8 years avoiding, a wedding in Napa Valley for my little sister, Jessica. There was a handwritten note in the margin, not in the planner's font, but in Jess's slanted familiar hand. Britt, it won't be the same without you. Please come. The paper trembled in my fingers. Funny how muscle memory outlives affection. In my mind, I walked to that old Orange County mansion again, my footfalls crisp across marble, like you could hear yourself being measured. Father at the head of the table, never looking up from quarterly reports. Linda, the stepmother whose smile had the lacquer of a showroom finish. Sarah Mitchell, her ever-present friend, a socialite chorus that harmonized with every judgment. Uncle Charles, not a blood patriarch, but an acting one whenever father was too busy, deciding holidays like he was doling out company stock. Cousin Robert, already interning at Larson Enterprises by 18, flashing that grin that said, excellence was hereditary, and I'd somehow missed the gene. Little Avery, 7 then, soft-eyed and quiet, the only one who asked questions that sounded like care. I was the wrong instrument in a family that liked orchestras. While everyone else learned balance sheets, I learned light, how to catch it in a lens at 4 p.m., how shadows could make a glass of water look like a cathedral. My mother, gone since I was 9, had once told me that the world rearranges when you pay attention. After she died, nobody left had time for rearranging. Father's rules were clean. Study business, join the firm, marry a resume. I chose a camera. The first real rupture came at 17, when I announced I was applying to study digital media. I can tell you the exact second the room chilled, the part where Father's fork kissed porcelain and stopped. You think you can throw away your future for an internet hobby? Matthew said, the word hobby coated with a contempt that stuck to the walls. Linda called it charming, if unrealistic. Sarah laughed into her wine. Uncle Charles said, Ilara, we're Larsons. Act like it. Jessica was too young to speak then, but afterward she slipped into my room and watched me film a shaky clip about composting on a hand-me-down camcorder. You'll be famous, she whispered, a conspirator at the door. I got into a decent program in LA, survived on waitressing and freelance editing when Father cut the cord because I wouldn't minor in business. Then you're on your own, he said, like banishment could be neat. It wasn't. It was mold in the shower and ramen in the pantry, and the kind of loneliness that makes you narrate your life into a camera just to hear a response. Green Vibes with Alara started there. Bad lighting, good heart, 50 views, then 100, then 1,000. I learned how to tell the truth so people would listen, how a small apartment can grow herbs on a windowsill, how secondhand isn't second best, how a person can compost grief and call it purpose. Years became a rhythm. 1 video every week, 2 jobs, no holidays at the mansion. 8 birthdays went by without a family table, but I built another kind of home, an audience that talked back, work that felt like a hand extended. Somewhere in the middle of that climb, I met Ethan Carter at a panel on renewables. He asked sharp questions and listened soft. We got married in a greenhouse with 10 friends and a fiddle player. Jessica mailed me a leather notebook for ideas and a note that said, "Proud of you. Someday I'm going to stand up to them too." No one else from the family sent anything but silence. "Are you going to go?" Ethan asked now, reading Jess's scrawl over my shoulder. The afternoon light made our kitchen look like a place you could start over. There were herbs on the sill, a tripod leaning in the corner, 2 mugs that didn't match. Our life had never been symmetrical, but it was ours. "I don't know," I said. 8 years is a canyon. You don't cross it on a whim. "You wouldn't be going for them," he said. "You'd be going for Jess." I thought of Jessica's braid on the day of the school recital when she forgot her lines, and the way she looked for me, not Father, not Linda. I thought of how we'd drifted, because drifting is what families like ours do to people who won't be managed. I thought of the note. "Please come." "I'll go," I said, and felt the decision settle like a stone that fits in your palm. But I won't go as the daughter they remember. Ethan smiled at that. I'll be there for the reception. Board meeting in the morning, but I'll drive up after. I can handle a ceremony, I said, trying for lightness. The invitation included a card labeled Evening Program. Surprises to honor our beloved. The word surprises prickled. Somewhere in my head, I heard an event planner chirp. We've tested the projector twice. Timing is everything. I pictured a screen big enough to flatten anyone who couldn't control the remote. That night, I pulled an emerald dress from my rack. Clean lines, compostable fabric, a piece we were dropping next season, paired with low heels I could move in. I tucked a copy of our latest brand partnership contract into my portfolio, not because I needed proof, but because sometimes you bring receipts to a bank that once foreclosed on you. I opened my old teen video for a grim minute, the one where I said into a shaky lens that I wanted to make content that changed the world. The girl on the screen had frizzy hair and an earnestness that could get you laughed out of a ballroom. I didn't close the window. I let her play until she convinced me again. At dawn, Napa's invitation paper sat on the counter like a dare. I slid it into my bag on the way out the door. If they wanted a performance, they'd get one, just not the kind anyone rehearsed for. Somewhere, a projector would hum, and a technician would wait for his cue. Somewhere, a room would decide whether to laugh or listen. And somewhere, my sister would be standing in a dress too heavy for the girl I used to tuck in at night, looking for me in a crowd. I drove north with the windows down, the road unspooling like a line you finally tug to see what's on the other end. The vineyard hills were green and arrogant. The resort rose ahead, all glass and light and places to be seen. As I turned into the drive, a crew wheeled a massive screen across the lawn, the kind you use when you want a story to have only one version. I parked. I breathed. I walked toward the lion's den with my head up, thinking about the strange mercy of a camera, how it records everything, including the moment a room decides to go quiet. The Napa air smelled like celebration and rot. Roses, money, and the faint sting of wine left too long open. The resort stretched across the hillside like it was built to impress God himself. Marble fountains, vines trained into perfect symmetry, servers moving in synchronized lines. Every petal, every flute of champagne seemed engineered for one purpose, to be seen. Inside the lobby, a young coordinator with a clipboard looked up as I approached. Name, please? Elara Wynn, I said, bracing for the flicker of recognition. Her pen hovered. Oh, you're with the secondary tables. The way she said it, soft, apologetic, practiced, made it worse. Secondary, like a polite downgrade. Thank you, I murmured, but something in my chest twisted. Old habits die hardest. The reflex to shrink, to smile, to pretend it doesn't sting. I followed the signs toward the guest wing. Every corner glittered with the kind of wealth that doesn't whisper, it boasts. Even the hallway smelled expensive, lavender oil and wax polish. Then I saw her, Linda. She stood near the entrance to the courtyard, draped in red silk that could pay a semester of tuition. A diamond bracelet caught the light every time she gestured, which was often. She was surrounded, as usual, a ring of women who looked ready to audition for her approval. Her eyes landed on me like a spotlight. Surprise, then calculation. Then that practiced smile that could slice through glass. Elara, she said, voice pitched high enough for nearby guests to hear, I didn't think you'd show. I wouldn't miss Jessica's wedding, I replied, steady. Well, she leaned in, air kissing my cheek. You look healthy. It wasn't a compliment, it was an inspection. Her perfume was sharp, gardenia and control. Still doing those little videos? She added, her tone syrupy. Still changing the world, I said lightly, and her smile froze for a fraction too long. Before she could recover, a familiar voice floated in. Elara Wynn, drawled Sarah Mitchell, Linda's echo and longest-standing parasite. She looked me up and down, her black gown hugging every ounce of self-importance. It's been, 8 years? Still playing with your camera? They're not play, I said. They're my career. Sarah laughed, a brittle sound. Sweetheart, subscribers don't pay the bills. You should have listened to Matthew and joined the company. Linda's laughter followed, soft but mean. Some people just don't know their place, she murmured, loud enough for me to hear. Old anger stirred, the kind that doesn't shout. It calcifies. I smiled instead. You're right, I said. Some of us build our own. I walked off before either could respond, heels tapping the marble in rhythm with my pulse. The ceremony space opened before me. Rows of white chairs overlooking the vineyard, a string quartet tuning up. Fairy lights twined through the branches. Somewhere, glasses clinked. I found a seat near the back beside two guests who barely nodded. From here, I could see the entire setup and the massive projector screen being tested behind the head table. The technician adjusted cables, the image flickering briefly to life before fading to black. A surprise segment, I remembered. A knot formed in my stomach. The hush fell when Jessica appeared. She was radiant. Ivory gown, veil floating like breath, a softness that hadn't hardened under the family's polish. Uncle Charles walked her down the aisle, standing in for Father, who apparently preferred to make an entrance later. When her gaze met mine, she smiled, a flicker of the girl who once believed in me. It steadied something inside me. The ceremony was beautiful, almost painfully so. The vows were tender, the applause genuine. For a moment, I forgot the audience, the hierarchy, the years. I just saw my sister, grown, luminous, stepping into her own life. Then came the reception. The ballroom was a cathedral of vanity. Chandeliers, gold-rimmed plates, a champagne tower that looked engineered for Instagram. My table was near the back again, beside an elderly couple who seemed unsure why they were invited. I caught glimpses of familiar faces. Robert, heavier now, but still smirking. Uncle Charles, counting place cards. Sarah already drinking too much. Dinner hadn't even started when Sarah's voice carried across the room. "Remember when Alara thought she'd be the next Oprah?" she said, laughing loudly. Locked herself in her room, pretending to have a talk show. Laughter rippled, heads turned, my skin prickled. Linda's voice joined in, melodic and cruel. "Such a shame," she sighed. "So much potential, all thrown away for... what was it again? Compost?" A few guests chuckled politely. Others looked down, embarrassed but unwilling to interfere. I took a slow sip of champagne, my hand steady, even though my heartbeat wasn't. "You don't get to ruin me twice," I whispered under my breath. I almost made it through dinner unnoticed after that, until the clinking began. Silverware on glass. Dozens of them. Matthew Larson had arrived. He stood at the head table, tall, still commanding in a tux that looked custom-stitched to power. His voice boomed easily over the chatter. "Before dessert," he said, "I'd like to propose a toast." The room quieted. His eyes found mine, sharp and deliberate. "To my daughter, Alara, who chose the scenic route through life, the road of idealism and internet fantasies." Polite laughter followed. I froze. "Let's take a trip down memory lane," he continued, gesturing toward the technician. And then it happened. The projector came to life. The screen filled with a teenage girl. Messy hair, oversized hoodie, wide eyes. Me. 17-year-old Ilara sitting cross-legged in her bedroom, camera shaking, as I said, "I'm going to make videos that change the world." Laughter exploded. I felt the ground tilt. My chest tightened. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. "Oh my God, she was serious," she gasped. Linda leaned toward her, whispering something that made them both cackle. Even Uncle Charles chuckled behind his hand. Jessica sat frozen, her face pale, her hands twisted in her napkin. The room had turned into a theater, and I was the joke. The screen froze on my young, hopeful face. I could hear my own voice echoing through the speakers. That's my future. I wanted to run. Instead, I breathed. Once. Twice. The laughter swelled again, until a new sound cut through it. A door opening. Footsteps. Firm. Familiar. I turned, and there he was. Ethan. He moved through the room with the quiet gravity of someone who didn't need introductions. The laughter faltered. Heads turned. He reached me in seconds, his hand brushing mine. "Sorry I'm late," he said softly. "Traffic was brutal." The air in the room shifted, like pressure before a storm. Matthew frowned. "And you are?" Ethan smiled. "Ethan Carter, Alara's husband." He looked at the screen, then back at Matthew. "Nice touch," he said evenly. "Public humiliation of your own kid. Very on brand." The room went silent. Somewhere, a fork clattered to the floor. I felt my pulse slow. For the first time all evening, I wasn't alone. And as Ethan's hand found mine, the silence grew heavy, the kind that comes right before everything changes. You could have heard a glass bead drop. The laughter, sharp, cruel, satisfied, curled up and died in the air. Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm was louder than any shout. "That video you're all laughing at," he said evenly, glancing toward the screen still frozen on my teenage face, "was filmed by a kid who refused to let this family break her." Matthew's jaw tightened. "Excuse me?" Ethan took a slow breath, like he had all night to dismantle them. You think you're toasting a failure, but what you're really doing is proving her right. A murmur ran through the tables. Someone's champagne flute clinked nervously. Green Vibes with Alara, Ethan continued, reaches over 2 million subscribers. Millions who care about sustainability, who learn from the work she does. She's partnered with Patagonia, with Tesla, people who actually build the future instead of selling property to bury it under. The last line landed like a slap. Linda's painted smile froze halfway. Sarah lowered her glass. Robert coughed into his napkin. Ethan wasn't done. I run Carter Energy, he said, turning his gaze back to Matthew. Renewable infrastructure. We just closed a $20 million state contract. Alara's creative campaigns help secure it. She's not your embarrassment. She's your better legacy. Every word unspooled, slow, deliberate. A few guests exchanged uneasy glances. Others stared at me like I'd stepped out of the screen and rewritten the script. Jessica's chair scraped back. She stood abruptly, her veil trembling against her shoulders. Enough, she said, voice breaking but fierce. Stop it, Dad. Matthew blinked. Jessica? No. She took a breath that shook and steadied in the same moment. Britt. She caught herself, corrected. Alara's the only one who ever believed in me. When you told me I wasn't smart enough for Stanford, she stayed up all night helping me write my essay anyway. When Mom... Her voice faltered. When Linda told me to hide my art portfolio, Alara posted it for me anonymously so I could get real feedback. She's the only reason I ever had courage to try. Her words cracked through the ballroom like glass. Matthew's face turned crimson. This is not the time. It's exactly the time, Jessica snapped. You humiliated her in front of strangers to feed your ego. You've been wrong about her since the day she picked up a camera. Silence again, thicker this time. I didn't move. My fingers tightened around Ethan's hand. Linda's voice came out too bright, brittle. Darling, emotions are running high. Let's all calm down. Jessica turned to her stepmother. Calm down. You just laughed at her. You've been laughing at her for years. Sarah muttered, We were only joking. Ethan looked at her with polite disbelief. You're adults bullying a teenager on screen. If that's a joke, the punchline's cruelty. The guests were trapped between discomfort and fascination. The screen behind us still showed 17-year-old me, frozen mid-smile, eyes full of hope. The projector hummed softly, waiting for someone to end it. I stepped forward, heart hammering but steady now. You wanted a show, I said quietly. Here it is. I reached for the remote resting on the nearest table and pressed pause. The image disappeared. That girl you mocked built a business. Built a life. You can keep your empire. I built mine out of belief. Matthew's lips pressed into a thin line. You think a few internet views make you a success? No, I said. The fact that you had to broadcast an old video to feel powerful tells me exactly who succeeded. Gasps fluttered like moths. Somewhere in the back, someone started clapping. Tentative, then louder. It spread, cautious applause breaking the tension. Linda shot a desperate glance at her husband. Matthew. But Jessica was already crossing the room toward me. Her gown swept across the marble, petals scattering in her wake. She took my hand, eyes wet but shining. You don't owe them another word, she whispered. Then louder to everyone, I'm proud of her. The crowd seemed to exhale. Even Ryan, her groom, stepped up beside her, sliding an arm around her waist in silent agreement. Matthew looked like he wanted to speak but couldn't find the language for defeat. Ethan leaned close to me, voice low. You okay? I nodded, barely holding it together. I think so. Then let's go, he murmured. We turned, moving through a parting sea of stunned relatives. The string quartet, unsure what else to do, picked up a slow melody that somehow made the whole thing feel cinematic. At the doorway, Linda called out, desperation threading her tone. Alara, wait, let's not leave it like this. I paused just long enough to look back. You made your choice 8 years ago, I said. I'm just keeping mine. The doors closed behind us with a hush like the end of a prayer. Outside, the night air was cool and honest. The vineyard glowed gold under strings of lights. I could finally breathe. Ethan slipped his arm around me. You handled that beautifully, he said. I didn't do anything, I said, voice trembling into a laugh. They just saw who I've always been. Somewhere inside, music started up again. Louder, forced, hollow. But out here, under the Napa stars, I felt something new bloom in the silence between us. Peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't standing in their shadow. I was standing in my own light. The drive back to the hotel was quiet, but not the suffocating kind that hums with leftover adrenaline and the faint tremor of relief. Napa's roads curved like ribbon under the car lights, and the stars above looked unreal, like a set piece that forgot to dim. Ethan kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting over mine. "You were incredible," he said finally, voice low, proud. I shook my head. "No, I just didn't run this time." That's what made it incredible. The truth was, I'd imagined that confrontation for years, replayed versions of it in my head every time they sent silence instead of love. But the reality wasn't triumph. It was quieter. A strange calm, the kind you feel when a wound finally closes and you realize the scar doesn't hurt anymore. At the hotel, Ethan poured us each a glass of the complimentary champagne. I barely touched mine. My phone buzzed nonstop. Texts, missed calls, notifications I didn't have the strength to open. Ethan nodded toward it. "You going to check?" "Not tonight." I set it face down on the table. "Tonight, I just want to breathe." He kissed the top of my head. "Then breathe, Alara. The world can wait." By morning, the messages had multiplied. A digital avalanche. Jessica's name blinked at the top. "Please call me." Then a dozen from numbers I didn't recognize. Then one from Avery. I opened hers first. "Avery, I saw what happened last night. You were so brave. I wish I could have said something, but Mom wouldn't let me. I watch all your videos. I want to be like you." Attached was a photo, a small notebook filled with sketches and scribbled ideas for her own channel. "Avery makes." My throat tightened. I typed back before I could overthink it. "Me. Start now. Send me your first video when it's ready. I'll help you." A minute later, she replied, "Really?" Me. "Really? Don't let them talk you out of it." That simple message, more than all the applause, more than the gasps, felt like the real ending of last night. Or maybe the beginning of something else. Jessica called that afternoon. I almost didn't pick up, but when I did, all I heard was breathing at first. Uneven, nervous. "Elara?" "Hey," I said quietly. "I don't even know what to say," she blurted. "I'm so sorry. For last night, for—" "Jess," I cut in. "It's okay." "No, it's not." Her voice cracked. "I should have said something sooner. Years sooner. Every time I tried, they made me feel like I owed them my silence." There was a pause. I could hear her swallow. "You didn't owe them anything," I said. "None of us did." "Ryan's furious," she admitted, a small, shaky laugh behind her tears. "He told Dad this morning that if he ever pulled something like that again, he'd ban him from our house." I smiled despite myself. "Ryan's braver than most Larsons I know." "Yeah," she said, exhaling. "He is." Silence again, comfortable this time. "I meant what I said last night," she added. "You're my hero, Ilara. You were right to leave, and I want us to start over. As sisters, not players in their drama." That one sentence undid something inside me. The years of distance, the hurt. It didn't erase them, but it softened their edges. "I'd like that," I whispered. "Come to San Francisco next month?" she asked. "No ballrooms, just the two of us. Coffee and ocean air." "Deal." When I hung up, I sat by the window for a long time, watching the vineyards sway in the afternoon light. The anger I'd carried for years, the armor I'd worn, felt too heavy now. I wasn't sure I needed it anymore. A few days later, I was back in Los Angeles. The city hummed, alive and impersonal in the way I loved. My office smelled like eucalyptus and coffee grounds. My editing monitor still had the same paused frame, a thumbnail from my latest upload about sustainability. But something in it looked different now. Maybe it was me. Ethan leaned against the doorway. "Back to saving the planet?" "Trying," I said. He smiled. "You're trending, you know. Someone filmed that scene at the wedding. It's all over social media. Woman confronts family that mocked her dreams. 500,000 views already." I blinked. "You're kidding." He shook his head. "You came full circle. The girl they laughed at for filming herself just went viral for being herself." I laughed. The real kind, loud and a little disbelieving. Of course they'd finally watch when they weren't invited to. He grinned, stepping closer. "So what's next?" I looked around my studio, at the plants I'd revived, at the sunlight cutting through dust, at the stack of Avery's sketches I'd printed out. I said, it's time to start something new." "What kind of new?" "Something bigger than green vibes. Not just content, community. A platform for young creators like Avery. People who were told their dreams were ridiculous." Ethan's smile deepened. "So you're building the thing you needed." "Exactly." He slipped an arm around my waist. "Sounds like a revolution." I kissed his cheek. "It always was." That night, I opened a blank document titled Project Second Bloom. Under it, I wrote, "For the ones who were laughed at, for the ones who kept filming anyway." And as I typed the first lines of the next chapter, I realized something simple. I'd gone to that wedding thinking I was walking into my past, but really, I'd been walking out of it. It's strange how peace doesn't announce itself. It just moves in quietly and rearranges the furniture of your life. Weeks after the wedding, the noise finally faded. The tabloids that had latched onto the viral family humiliation story found newer scandals, and the Larsons retreated into what they did best, pretending nothing ever happened. But something had. The morning sun poured across our loft, turning the walls gold. I sat at my desk, a cup of jasmine tea cooling beside my keyboard, editing a new episode of Green Vibes. The topic was starting over without permission. On the second monitor, a new email pinged. Subject line, potential collaboration, Avery makes. I opened it and smiled. There she was, 15 now, standing in front of a backyard clothesline strung with upcycled denim. She spoke with the same nervous determination I'd once had, her voice catching, but her eyes bright. "Hi, I'm Avery, and today we're turning old jeans into something new. Because waste isn't just trash, it's a chance to begin again." Her smile at the end was crooked and brave. I watched it twice, then a third time, feeling something stir. Pride, protectiveness, maybe both. I replied, subject, keep going. Body, you have the spark. I'll feature you in next month's mentorship episode. Welcome to Second Bloom. The send button clicked like a heartbeat. By February, the idea that started as a line in my notebook had become real. Project Second Bloom launched quietly, a digital collective for young creators, giving them resources, visibility, and the message I'd needed most at 17. You don't need permission to matter. Jessica was the first to donate. No announcement, no credit, just a private message. For Avery and for us. That text meant more than any applause I'd ever gotten. She was different now, too. Her honeymoon glow had softened into something steadier, a woman learning how to draw her own boundaries. We called once a week, laughing about childhood memories that used to ache. Ryan would sometimes pop into frame, waving with a spatula or mug of coffee, and for the first time, our conversations didn't orbit the family's expectations. We were building something new. Then came the voicemail. I didn't recognize the number at first. The voice was hesitant, unfamiliar in its restraint. "Elara, it's Linda." I froze. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I just wanted to say..." A pause. "You were right about a lot of things. I didn't understand what you were doing back then. I thought control meant care. It wasn't. It was fear. Anyway, congratulations on your platform. It's impressive." Another pause, then softer. "I hope Jessica's happy, and you too." The message ended without a goodbye. I didn't call back, but I didn't delete it either. I saved it under closure and left it there. Proof that some ghosts don't haunt you. They just echo once before going quiet. Ethan and I spent the spring traveling up and down the coast, filming a new docuseries, Reclaimed, Stories of Renewal. Small towns turning abandoned lots into gardens, artists rebuilding from ruins. Everywhere we went, I saw versions of myself, people who refused to let ridicule define the ending. One evening in Oregon, while the camera crew packed up, Ethan handed me a coffee and leaned against the van. "You ever think about how far you've come?" he asked. "Sometimes," I said, watching the sun sink behind a ridge of pines. "But mostly, I think about how far I used to let them decide for me." He nodded, understanding. "You turned their story into compost," he said with a grin. "And look what grew." I laughed, nudging him with my shoulder. "You're getting poetic." Occupational hazard of being married to a storyteller. I looked at him then, really looked. His patience, his steady presence, the way he'd stood beside me in that ballroom without flinching. For years, I'd thought love was something you earn by being enough. Now I knew better. The right kind of love doesn't require performance. It just stands next to you and waits for the lights to stop blinding you. A few months later, the Second Bloom Collective hosted its first live event in Los Angeles, a small studio gathering, part workshop, part celebration. The space was filled with mismatched chairs, murals painted by young creators, laughter bouncing off the walls. Avery stood near the front, hair braided with green ribbons, reading from her notebook. "We all start as the thing someone else laughs at," she said, her voice trembling but strong. "But we don't have to stay there. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. I stood beside the camera, tears slipping down my cheeks, unseen but not unnoticed. Jessica squeezed my hand from the front row. We'd come full circle. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I lingered in the empty studio. The fairy lights buzzed softly overhead. On one wall, someone had pinned a printed still from that humiliating video. 17-year-old me, wide-eyed and hopeful. Below it, a photo from tonight. Avery, mid-laugh, holding a microphone. Between them, I taped a small handwritten note. Dreams aren't punchlines, they're blueprints. I stepped back, wiped my eyes, and smiled. Outside, Los Angeles hummed. Alive. Imperfect. Endless. Somewhere out there, another girl was picking up a camera, ready to be misunderstood. And maybe someday she'd find her way here. Because this time the light was staying on,